Oh man, I was trying to work out what the most expensive thing in my house was recently for insurance reasons, and it turns out it's that folder of shiny cardboard.
Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain. We move on. Here's the new villain. We beat the new villain.
Run. Welcome to Podagus, your friendly 8-legged dog bus companion through the 2020 Digimon Adventure reboot. This week we're discussing episode 58, Hikari, New Life. I'm your host, Jeff Ruberg, and I'm excited to welcome Connor from the Member Gauge podcast. How's it going, Connor?
Really good, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about Digimon and Digimon card game in particular. Usually, impressions of this show for someone whose main interest is the card game. But before we get into the card game stuff, what's your Digimon backstory? How'd you get into the franchise?
Like a lot of people, I guess I watched it when it was on just sort of morning children's television. For any Australian listeners, Cheese TV, which is a bit of a throwback, 90s throwback there, is the show that Digimon was broadcast on. So I watched the original Adventure, and then I kind of followed Adventure 2, and then I think Tamers and Frontier is the one with the hybrids. But after that, kind of dropped off. Just, I don't know, I think at about that point I was heading into high school, and it was kind of that too cool sort of thing, which was ridiculous because I was not too cool for anything. Total self-delusion. And then recently got back into it with the release of the new card game. I hadn't really looked at Digimon in years, and then my local game store put out a call, I think it was roughly this time last year, maybe a bit later, saying, hey, this new Digimon card game's coming out. We're trying to decide if we're going to stock it. Would people be interested? And I just started going because I've just recently moved to my new place. I just started going to this store, and I thought, I'll give them my honest assessment because I wanted to be a good, LGS customer. I think that's important. So I looked into the game and I thought it looked really cool. It had a lot of mechanics that I really liked. It was similar to a lot of games I'd played before that I really enjoyed that were no longer being made. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then just from that, I kind of slowly was like, well, there's all this stuff now I don't recognize. What are these new guys? Like, I know obviously all the adventure characters, but now they're throwing like Shoutmon and stuff at me, and I've got no idea what the heck that is. So I'm trying to get across it just to sort of broaden my understanding. So I've sort of come back into it that way after a long hiatus, sort of a prodigal son.
Did you feel like it was like coming back into it with some of those holes in your knowledge? Did you feel like it was like alienating having those holes, or was it like exciting to like have things that were unknown?
Oh, I think it was definitely more exciting than alienating. Generally the people I've spoken to about it have been pretty friendly and inviting and catching me up. And it was just these characters that I really liked as a kid, and all this new stuff in this world that I all of a sudden remembered, hey, I really like this. Like, I don't know why I stopped participating in this because I never stopped enjoying it. So it's been really cool to catch up on everything and see what's gone on and start having opinions about things again.
So were you were a regular card game player before this game started coming out?
Yeah, I've been playing card games on and off for as long as I can remember. I started as a kid way back with the Pokemon card game, and then went through Yu-Gi-Oh, playing it incorrectly along with everybody else at my school. And,
I miss those days where you could just be the smartest person in school because you knew how the rules worked. Like,
yeah, you just needed the strength of will to convince other people to do it your way, though, which I feel like I lacked, especially when it would result in them not getting to do the cool thing they were trying to do, like play three Blue Eyes White Dragons in one turn or whatever it was.
Yeah, I remember people doing like playing spells out of their hand when it wasn't their turn and stuff, and it's like, that's okay. People
are having fun, I guess. But again, kind of dropped off with that, but never stopped being interested in it, and then picked up Magic as kind of I'm 28 now, so mid-20s. Picked that up, started doing a lot of Commander at my local game store because, again, that was kind of a more fun social variety because that's with like 4 players. You're not really trying to win as much. You're more just trying to do something interesting and have fun with people and enjoy the mechanics of the game rather than necessarily being too competitive, which suited me really well. And I had been doing that for ages and slowly looking at other games now that I've kind of come into a place in my life where I have that enough disposable income to spend it on shiny pieces of cardboard without worrying too much about where my next meal is going to come from afterwards.
Yeah, my impression is that Digimon is not the cheapest card game to get into these days. So,
ooh, not at the moment, no, which is a bit sad, really, because it is a bit off-putting to new people. But hopefully, that seems to be slowly kind of getting a bit better, as far as I can tell. Very slowly, but it is improving.
Yeah. Hopefully someday it changes.
Yes.
But yeah, quick lightning round of Digimon-related questions. So,
all right.
Based on your headspace now, even if some of the memory is foggy or whatever, what would you consider your favorite season of the anime?
Okay. I'm sure I'm going to say a lot of things that will have people at home who are in the know really like wincing and oh, really? But so favorite season was probably Adventure 2. I loved the Armor Digivolution, that whole concept. I really enjoyed the lost form of Digivolution. That's cool. That's like a really cool concept. And it had some of my favorite Digimon as well. It's got like Vmon and all of his Armor Digivolution things going on. It had Ken, who of course, gotta love Ken.
Oh yeah.
Imperial Dramon, who is just like a boss, very cool. Big Dragon guy who is also a warrior, like that's totally in my wheelhouse as like a 90s kid. It's like he's a dragon and he's a sword fighter. That's amazing. Best of both worlds.
So who's your all-time favorite Digimon?
Oh, this has changed very recently. It's pivoted around to being Dark Tyrannomon because I've always liked the dinosaur and dragon kind of Digimon. I've always been a sucker for like an evil version of the good guy, and Dark Tyrannomon's kind of like the evil-y version of Tyrannomon. And was my favorite card in the first Digimon card game set. There was a Tyrannomon who basically did nothing except be tough and be cheap to digivolve into, but I just liked that I could beat face with it. He looked pretty cool. The art was pretty cool. So I've kind of pivoted around to being like, yep, this is my brand. I like Dark Tyrannomon. I'm
kind of envious of that, like having a brand for like a little bit of an obscure pick, because my picks are so basic, and it's like, I mean, I feel it's like, oh, it's the ones that got prominent placement in the anime. Like, so I think that's cool. Do you have a favorite villain from the show?
Yeah, I would say if we're calling him a villain, Black War Greymon from Adventure 2, because again, evil version of the good guy. I thought he had a surprisingly strong arc for like early Digimon. And there's something that really appeals to the arts major in me about the fact that like the Adventure 2 teams, one of their biggest challenges is literally the shadow of the heroes that came before them. Like that's kind of mythic in a way. And I'm sure that was not on some level intentional. Whether it was executed well, you could probably argue about, but I think the idea is really cool.
Yeah. And of the like main adventure cast, who's your favorite character?
Okay, I know that this is going to be one that will make people cringe. Tai. Maybe not so much in the new series. I know it's such a like basic take. But from the original adventure, I liked him. He's a good kid. He's headstrong and he's got like a hero complex, but I kind of identify with that. Like he's the leader, but he falls into that trap of like, I'm the leader, so I have to solve all the problems and do everything and be the hero all the time. And that's like his big flaw. And I get that. I identify with that, and I think I just think that that's interesting. I think he's cool. He was the main guy, so yeah, I guess I fell into that trap as well. Like, yeah, he's my favorite. He's the one on the front.
It's a little unfortunate. I feel like they've avoided this in the new show for any of the other characters, but definitely for Taichi, they've like almost assassinated his character in the consciousness. Like it's like before the series came out, saying Taichi is your favorite character wouldn't have been controversial at all. But now it's like, but do you have a hottest Digimon take?
Ooh, I do. I think that Matt is a little bit overrated. He's fine. I'm going to say he's fine. He's not a bad character. I'm not saying I don't like him. I'm just saying that I don't think he's like the be all and end all in cool that he kind of gets made out to be. He gets a lot of love. People say he's really, really cool. And I don't see that. I think honestly, he's a little bit of a dork because he doesn't really know how to get along with people. He's a little bit socially awkward. So and I don't think, I was never a big fan of those characters who are like standoffish and mean to people, because I'm not a mean person. I like being nice to people. So you show me this kid who's like, yeah, I'm too cool to hang out with you. And I'm like, okay, I won't hang out with you. Easy.
You're not wrong. But also, I mean, you're biased as a tie stand. So.
Oh yeah, I'm going to get a lot of hate, and I'm just leading into the skid at this point.
Okay, so here's the most bizarre question. If you had to invite 3 Digimon characters to a dinner party, who would be your ideal Digimon dinner party?
Oh, this was so tough. I said Mimi. I think she would be interesting conversation. I think she'd be just fun to hang out with. From the original adventure, as I remember him, Frigimon. I don't think he was in it for very long, but he struck me as like this really relaxed guy, and you don't have to worry about bringing enough ice, which is nice. And Gomamon, because again, really down to earth kind of guy, pretty relaxed. I think it would just be a like chill kind of vibe, I guess is what I'm going for. So I picked the 3 characters I thought would suit that the best.
Nice. So before we pivot to the card game a little bit, what has been your experience with Adventure 2020? Like aside from the episode we're talking about this week, like how much have you seen and what was your impression before?
Yeah, I've seen one other episode. I watched episode 1 and then that's it. So for those listening at home, I watched episode 1 and then I watched this one, which I think is 58.
So was that episode 1 around when it came out or was it more recently?
Oh no, that was quite recently. I've been putting it off a little bit. I kept meaning to, but then in my head I was like, oh, but I'll watch the original one first. And of course, like that never happened. So I just never got around to
Life
watching.
happens.
Yeah. But I liked it. I felt like it went really fast. Like straight away, we've got Greymon, episode 1. I know that even in Original Adventure, that was episode 2, I think. So it was like straight into it. Yep, we're here. We're digivolving. I felt very confused as to what exactly was going on because Izzy was all across it and I don't know how. He knew what was going on. He was like, yep, you're in the digital world. There's Digimon and here's the lay of the land. How do you... Okay.
He's just smart.
Yeah, I get that. But like, there's better ways to show people being smart than they just have all the answers. Maybe I missed it. I did watch it very quickly and just the once. So maybe I missed the explanation. But it felt like they just threw you into it and lent a little bit on the fact that people know these characters, they know the story, they know what's going to happen. You're going to the digital world, so they didn't have to go too far into it. And I'm willing to be wrong. But yeah, that's just the way it felt to me watching that episode. And then coming to this one, I've still got no idea what's going on, but to like a whole other level.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think the show is made to be, accessible to people who just have vague memories of the characters. So it's like, well, I think it's made for people who have vague memories of the characters and people who are little kids and can just pick it up as they watch. You're like, who cares what the details are? So, yeah, I think I'm interested to hear your impressions of this episode. But before we get into that, we're going to have some card game talk. I have a bunch of questions that I think what I'm interested in hearing from you is, first of all, listeners, you should go check out the Memory Gauge podcast if you want more detailed card game talk, lots of in-depth episodes. But what I'm interested in hearing from you is basically people who, have been following the anime and been like kind of on the fence about the card game and like, it seems kind of cool, but like, how do I get into it? So I kind of wanted to get some advice from you about how people can get into the game. Where should people start? Basically like how should people find stuff to buy and where can you find people to play with?
Okay. So I guess if you're completely new, you're wanting to try out the game for the first time, where I would recommend starting is I would recommend trying to track down one of the starter decks that they have released. There's 6 sort of colors in the card game that represent like, the different ways to play the game. Basically, they're all slightly different mechanics, and they've got a starter deck for each of the colors. It's a full deck. You can play it right out of the box. They're unique cards in those decks. The cards in those decks don't actually come anywhere else. You can't get them anywhere else. So it's a pretty good investment. Like even people who otherwise have big collections, make sure to pick those starter decks up because some of the cards are actually quite strong and actually quite playable as well. So you could do a lot worse as a starting point for a collection because you will end up with some unique playable cards. And it's a good way, like they're starter product. So they're designed to sort of ease you into it and introduce you to the mechanics without necessarily overwhelming you too much. They can be a bit hard to track down because, as I said, they're unique cards and in a lot of cases they're pretty desirable. So unfortunately what's happened is that some of them have gotten quite expensive to buy from eBay and TCG Player and those kinds of places. So you might have to do a little bit of digging, but I know that for the most part, local game stores tend to try to keep prices down a little bit, at least the ones that I've had experience with, because it doesn't really behoove them to price people out of it so much. They want you not just buying the product, but like coming back to their store and participating in their events and buying lots of product over a long period of time. So making things too expensive to buy out of the gate is not going to behoove them because it stops people from picking up the game and like getting committed to it. So I would recommend going to preferably not, and this is just like the, you know, the small business person in me saying preferably not sort of Target and US Walmart. I just had to think for a second there. GameStop, those kinds of places, like they're big enough. They don't need your they don't necessarily need your money in, especially in these sort of difficult times we're all going through. So if you have a local game store near you, and you can pretty easily find that out with a quick Google search, I would recommend checking them out first, because I said it behooves them, like it works for them to get you into a game so that you keep coming back and keep picking up the new product. That's actually better for them. So they should be more than willing to help you pick up a game that you're interested in. If you just speak to them and say, hey, I'm interested in trying out the Digimon card game, most of them will be pretty happy to direct you to their events or to direct you to what products are good to start with, etc.
Yeah, I should add though that, like, at least based on my own experience, it might be because I'm in a fairly large city, but like not every local game store is going to be as friendly or inviting. Basically, like the inflation of this card game market that we're in right now, I think a lot of stores have needed to price things, keep up with the market price just to stay afloat. So I mean, my local game store that is the most convenient for me is like selling everything at like 2x inflated price. I mean, they're matching market price, but they also have like a discount scheme where you have to buy a subscription to the store to get them at the normal price, and otherwise they're inflated even more. And it's like, oh, this feels icky, but like I guess they needed to survive. So and they also aren't doing local events, so it's like, I mean, I don't know, it feels a little bit like a money grab. But yeah, hopefully people can find a local game store that is, committed to the local, actual playing at the store kind of scene.
Yes, that would be the dream. But barring that, what's really good about the way that the Digimon card game is set up at the moment, and the things that particularly the fans are doing, is that so long as you can find product at a price that works for you, and maybe that's going to be inflated, but ultimately it's worth, the price is worth whatever it means to you to pick it up. But once you get those cards, there's a really, really healthy online community as well. There's a lot of digital games happening. There's a lot of stuff over Discord and sort of platforms like that, where people are running tournaments, people are playing games online over webcam and stuff. And can we just pause for a second and take in how amazing it is for the Digimon card game specifically to have such a large digital presence? I think that's just very appropriate. So that is another way to go. If you don't have people necessarily locally to play with, I think the next best thing is to at least pick up the cards and see if you can sort out a device. And you can use your phone as a camera. Like, I've seen all kinds of wacky setups for that kind of digital play. There is a lot of that as well.
I mean, one big follow-up question I have is for people who, okay, so at the point where you have a starter deck, maybe you've played a couple rounds of the game, maybe with some friends, you like use starter decks. At what point would you recommend, like, at what point have you like leveled up enough that you can start playing with matches on with people online, or tournaments you can find online? Because one thing that I've struggled with is like, okay, I got starter decks, but like, I don't know, like, I definitely don't have enough product to like decide what deck to invest in and like buy all the singles. So it's like, but like I feel like I should actually play some decks before I actually commit to like hundreds of dollars of singles or something. So yeah, like basically how at one point do you think it makes sense to start finding a local scene to play, local or online? And how would you recommend people finding those like online ways of playing?
As to what point it makes sense to start doing that, in an ideal world, you should be able to feel comfortable participating in those events at whatever level, obviously, but we're not necessarily living in an ideal world. So I would say if you're passionate about it and you're enjoying yourself, you're willing to maybe make a couple of mistakes, but you want to learn, I think that's probably the point. The point where if you're at the point where you're thinking, man, I would really love to participate in more events for this or get into something a bit bigger, you're probably at a good point in your playing of the game to start looking into that. I would say, it's going to make me sound old, but Facebook I've had a lot of success with, joining various, so basically social media, joining various Digimon card game pages, groups, whatever it might be. It doesn't take a lot of effort in there. People are pretty keen on the online scene, so that's a really easy place to start looking for online games and getting involved, especially on Discord is probably where I've found the biggest communities on there. I'm happy to share some links through as well. Maybe we can put some of the things I've had success with out there. If that's, I don't know if we do that, but that's an option.
Yeah, I can put links in the show notes. Do you have like a general? I'm curious what it's like to like if you find matches on Facebook or Discord. Is that usually through like a like a small tournament format, or is that just like ad hoc? Like who wants to play? Okay, let's play.
There's definitely an element of the ad hoc, like who wants to play, let's play. But there are a lot of tournaments being run through that kind of through Facebook and through that kind of thing. A lot of them free, which is good. Like you don't want to, I guess, pay a lot of money to join an event and then kind of get totally creamed because you don't really know what you're doing. That's not going to be a fun experience. That's not going to feel like a good use of your money or time. But again, people are pretty passionate about the game. The players, I would say, and they really want to get lots of people playing it and tend to set the barrier as low as possible. So there's a lot of free events going around. There's a lot of tournaments. They don't take up depending on which event you choose to participate in, it doesn't have to take up a huge amount of your time. I've participated, and admittedly, I've got a weird time zone and playing in a lot of American events, but I've participated in a lot of events that it's like, I'll kill a Saturday morning and spend a couple of hours just playing a few games and see how it all goes. I've kind of been lucky that I've fallen into it in a lot of ways, specifically through the podcast. That's opened up a lot of channels for me to meet people and play games. So I'm really trying to think about how to approach it from someone who isn't like in with content creator stuff, I guess. Like I joined a lot of groups specifically for people making content for the card game. And of course, they're very passionate about playing the card game. So it was easy for me to find a lot of online games. In terms of how to find it when you're not approaching it from that angle, it is a little bit more difficult, but I would start with, if you don't have a local game store that has a good scene, which, probably describes most people, I would say. Online would be the way to go through those kind of social media places. And again, I would happily share all the places I've had success with that run events like that, because I think if you're interested in the game, participating in an event like that is a really good way to go. You see a lot of the decks that people are using that way. So maybe you've only got your starter deck, but you play in an event and you can see what other people are doing and maybe get an idea of, wow, that person was playing something that was looked really cool. I would love to do that. And maybe you can get an idea that way. So even if you're not testing the decks yourself, at least playing against them, you start to get an idea of, oh, that would be interesting. That would be fun. That's the kind of game I want to be playing, what that person was doing over there.
For people who are like completely new to card games, which is kind of the position I'm at, where I played them as like, like in like 7th grade or something, but not really any since then. Is there any like equipment that you might not know about they should get, especially for doing an online webcam kind of tournament?
Okay, so you want to participate in your online tournament, you will obviously need your cards. You're going to need card sleeves. That's a tournament requirement that they need to be opaque, so you can't see through the back. That's an official requirement set out through official channels, and most of tournaments are going to adhere to that. And unfortunately, because of the nature of the game, you're going to need 2 different sets, one for your main deck and one for your Digitama, Digi-Egg, whatever you want to call it, deck.
So they need to be different color.
Yeah, they need to be different colors or different designs. That's another requirement. So that's a little bit steep because it can be hard to find those sleeves. But once you get over that, you're pretty much set. Like you can have a playmat that will protect your cards, but it's not a requirement. Having some dice is good, but you'll just need like 6-sided dice, which are fairly easy to come by. You'll also probably need a memory gauge, which is a game piece that's specific to the Digimon card game, but they come in every booster pack, and so they're not too hard to come across. And really, so long as you've got a way to track how much memory you're spending, which you can write on a piece of paper, that doesn't have to be a barrier either. Like the first ones I ever used, I literally just drew it on a piece of paper. So I totally get that you don't necessarily need like a fancy game mat with a built-in memory gauge and all the sections set out. Like as long as you've got your cards, some dice, and like a paper and pen, you're pretty good. And then of course you'll need, if you're playing online, you'll need a camera setup, and that doesn't need to be really expensive or hard to do either. I had a lot of success in my first online games with just my laptop, my phone, a pile of books, and a thin cardboard box that I cut a slot in that I wedged my phone into so that the camera was pointing down at the table, and that was totally fine. Like that completely worked. You can really knock it up without a lot of like fancy arms connected to the table and like streaming webcams and stuff. It doesn't have to be that. So long as you can mostly make out the cards, people are pretty relaxed about the quality of the setup.
Yeah, I guess getting like a fancy, cool-looking setup can be really expensive and intimidating, but as long as it works, if you can use creativity to find something that points your phone at the cards. Is it pretty easy to set up, though, like if you're using your phone as the webcam to like get that recording using Discord and stuff?
I believe so. I've seen people using 2 Discord accounts is about the extent of the setup, where people have said, oh, I need to have 2 accounts joining this game because one of them is my phone and then one of them is my voice. But a lot of people have done that, and it doesn't seem very hard to set up. I've been lucky that I've already had a computer, so I didn't need to do that, but that's totally an option as well. And it's very, very doable, and not necessarily for the Digimon card game, but because of, we went through a pandemic, people still wanted to play card games. They figured out that you could do it over webcam. There are a lot of resources online as well, if you really want to look into it, for how to set up that kind of online play station, I guess. So there's totally ways to figure it out, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be really difficult. It can be really easy, and I think in a lot of cases it will be. It's not a huge barrier to entry, I don't think. I'm not particularly tech savvy, and I did figure it out after a couple of false starts.
Yeah, and if you do feel like that is the step that is intimidating you, like I'll put some links in the show notes to those resources, and you can always leave a comment on Twitter or on the podcast page, and I'll try to look up resources and help out. But if someone say like they're invested in the game, they want to really start to build their own decks, how do you recommend they pick their main color before they start investing in the color?
Well, there's this really great podcast going around. It's called The Memory Gauge, and they talk about this. There's lots of different ways that you can pick a color. Maybe that just happens to be the starter deck that you can get. Like maybe there's only one that's sort of within your price range at wherever you're able to get one. So you just go with that color. Maybe you decide to pick up a booster box and you think, oh, I've got a lot of good yellow cards, I'm going to build yellow. Or you can look into it and try to figure out which color is going to sort of match the kind of game that you want to be playing, or maybe a color that has the Digimon that you like. And again, there's lots of resources for that. Obviously, there's my podcast, but there are heaps and heaps of really cool, talented people making this kind of content for the card game and helping you to make those kinds of decisions. I was thinking I could give like a couple of sentences rundown of the colors for anybody who would be interested in maybe like if you're thinking of picking it up and you're trying to decide between the 6. So the 6 colors, you've got red, which is the most aggressive. If you like to build a big, strong Digimon and hit really hard with it, that's the color that you go if you want to be sort of aggressive and pressuring. It has lots of dinosaurs, dragons, fiery kind of Digimon, and it has the Agumon lines, so all the Greymon are in there, and the Biomon lines for those Biomon fans. It has Birdramon, Garudamon, that kind of thing. Then you've got blue, which is more technical. You draw a lot of cards, you manipulate your resources and your opponent's resources. It's got all the kind of aquatic and ice-based Digimon, and it's got Gabumon, Garurumon, Gobamon, those kind of Digimon. You've got yellow, which is kind of the strongest color at the moment. So if you're looking for the quote-unquote best color, I would pick up yellow right now. That's kind of replenishing your own security, which is kind of your health. So you're getting your health back and you're weakening your opponent's Digimon, and generally you're just keeping your opponent's board clear of their Digimon. So that's yellow. It's got all the holy Digimon, so like Patamon, Gatomon, Angemon, that kind of thing. You've got green, which is the cheapest Digivolution, so it's the best at Digivolving, and it's got lots of ways to control your opponent's board. You keep all their stuff from attacking you. It's got insects and plants, so it's got Palmon, Tentomon, that kind of Digimon. You've got black, which is defensive. It's got all of the Digimon that are going to block your opponent's attacks, and it's got its main method of removing threats is to de-Digivolve your opponent's Digimon. So if you like the idea of taking their War Greymon and busting that sucker back down to an Agumon, black is the color for you. It's got all the robotic and junk Digimon, Digimon, so Andromon, Gardramon, that kind of thing. And then you've got purple, which is more sort of a combo color, and that purple manipulates your trash, which is your discard pile. So you delete your own Digimon and get value out of that, or you bring them back over and over again in kind of a weird zombie resurrection kind of way. Purple fittingly has all the demonic evil Digimon. It's got Devimon, Myotismon, all the bad guys. So if you want to be a villain, purple's the way to go. So just as a really rough rundown, those are the colors and kind of the things they're trying to do. But as I said, there's plenty of resources to help you figure that out if you really want to make sure you're getting the right color that's going to fit what you want to do with the game.
And my struggle with that is that like all thematically, all of them sound pretty cool. You know, it's like each one has their
right.
own element that's like cool thematically, but also mechanically. So it's like, oh man, I could see myself picking any one of these 6 and going all into that. So
yeah, I wish I had a better way to sort of pare it down than that. But unfortunately, I think if you want to get to that level, I guess you're going to have to either do a bit of research into it or just go with the luck of the draw and say, I opened a bunch of green stuff, I'm going to play green. And that's totally a viable way to go as well. My friend is very passionate about green, and it's just because he opened like a bunch of cool green cards. And now he's been doing that for 4 sets now. He's all in on green, and it was totally like luck of the draw.
Nice. Yeah, I think also part of it is that you kind of have to get experience, see what it's like to play that color, and like you might end up choosing a different color eventually, but like you can't know that until you do it and feel what it's like.
You might be crazy and spend way too much money on it and build a deck of each color if you're like me. But yeah, I think it does come down to the experience and just looking into it, as you said.
Yeah, I think the one upside of the like crazy inflation that's happening with this game is that like if you do invest a lot in one color and then like decide later, like a lot of those cards probably could sell for pretty well once you decide you don't want to play it anymore. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's not you're not as much as it sucks getting the cards, like they are worth a lot of money once you've gotten them. So that's kind of neat.
Oh man, I was trying to work out what the most expensive thing in my house was recently for insurance reasons, and it turns out it's that folder of shiny cardboard.
Oh no.
Yep.
So I think last question I want to ask you is if there's any like common beginner mistakes that someone who's just getting to the game might make and you would kind of steer them away from.
I mean, there's a few common rules mistakes that people make, like forgetting to it's built into the game that whenever you digivolve a Digimon, you draw a card, and that's really important not to forget because it's kind of built into the game that you're going to be doing that. So if you forget to do that, you'll find that you really quickly run out of cards, which is not a good place to be. So definitely try to remember that. Try to remember the difference between on play and when digivolving. You have some effects that happen when you put a Digimon straight from your hand onto the field, and some that happen when you digivolve your Digimon, and just keeping track of which effects happen when is really important, because otherwise you might end up in a situation where you've planned to use a certain effect and then it turns out that you can't because it's a digivolving effect and you don't have something to digivolve it from. So just trying to get across that and making sure you read the rule book or watch people playing and try to keep that in mind. I guess I don't have better advice than just try to remember it, unfortunately. But probably the most complicated part and the part that trips people up a lot is, and I hate whenever I have to say this out loud. In English, it's called the breeding area, which is just regrettably named. The raising area where your Digi-eggs are. Just remembering that is kind of a separate little zone. We don't mess with the Digi-eggs. Nothing can touch them in there. No effects can target the Digimon that are in there, but also no effects of the Digimon in there happen. So if you've got a when digivolving effect and you use that Digimon in the, I would say raising area because it grosses me out a lot less. That doesn't happen. You can't get any of the cool Digivolution reduction effects in there. All of your stuff is full price because those effects don't work in there. And once you get across that, which is probably the most complicated part, you're probably in a really good place as far as rules mistakes go. In terms of strategy mistakes, probably the biggest one is around that memory gauge and knowing how to use that properly. I see a lot of people make the mistake of giving their opponent way too much memory because it's kind of a give and take system. I realize that I'm just saying that without maybe the context. Your resources are give and take. So if you play something that costs 5 and the memory gauge is at 0, you are giving your opponent 5 memory to use, and then they can use that until, again, that memory gauge crosses the middle line, And then they're saying, okay, and then you get this much for your turn. So you're trying to maximize what you do on your turn and minimize what your opponent can do. And the biggest mistake I see is people playing these huge things without really a plan to back it up. And then they've given their opponent a heap of resources to use without really thinking through what the consequences of that are going to be. But then the flip side of that is denying your opponent too many resources is probably the other biggest mistake. A lot of people think, okay, I've got the idea, give your opponent as little as possible. And that works up to a point. But then past that point, you're actually just limiting what you do without affecting your opponent too much. Because you get to a point in the game where they've got their Digimon on the board. They're set up. So the difference between 1 and 3 memory for them is pretty minimal. They won't have much to do with it anyway. But it's a huge difference to you, maybe. Maybe that difference between the thing that sets them to 1 and the thing that sets them to 3 could be the difference between winning and losing the game. So you just got to be aware of how much does it actually matter that I'm giving my opponent this much memory. So once you get a hold of that, then you're starting to get into get above sort of being a beginner and get into the more advanced stuff. But yeah, just being aware of that give and take element of it, I think, is probably the most common mistake I see. People not really thinking about it. And it's hard because not many other games use that kind of system. So I get it. It's hard to get across. But once you do, you'll be in a good spot.
Yeah. And every turn you give them just a little bit of memory is also accelerating the game forward with they get draw, which means they could get some really cool combo potential. It means they have more turns to have Digimon attacking. So if you spend all your time making sure they only get 1 memory, they could have wiped you out in that time. So I see there are common mistakes on both sides, and you kind of just need to get used to the game and play it and watch people play it, I think, to understand the trade-offs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to get more into the game recently. So this was, I think, a really cool little deep dive into how to do that, and I hope it was useful to some listeners.
Oh, I really hope so too. I really hope that I've not put anybody off. That would be the worst thing. I hope that no one's listening I'm not going to do that now. That would be a nightmare. Oh my gosh.
Well, I think the most important thing is once you refresh yourself on the card game and are committed to it, go listen to the Memory Gauge. There's lots of great content there to get you up to speed. And I think the color series you're doing now is really great, giving a little perspective on each different color.
Yeah, that's been a lot of fun to do. I guess if I had one big takeaway I want from this particular section, I just want to stress it's not finding the cards. Definitely the hardest part, and it's not that hard. It's just expensive at the moment. But once you sort of get past that hurdle, the game itself is actually quite easy to pick up. I know that I said a lot of really jargony stuff there, but it's not complicated, I promise. You'll be able to pick it up very easily.
Yeah, and one thing I appreciate about the Memory Gauge is that you talk about, the focus isn't always on the meta competitive decks. It's what's fun to make and thematically interesting and stuff. And I think that's something that has deterred me a little bit. Should I even get started if I don't have a $700 deck that can beat stuff? And it's that's not the point of the game. I should realize the point of the game is to have fun. So
absolutely. Well, I quickly realized that I'm not that competitive, and even when I try to be, I'm not that good at it. So it didn't really work for me to try and make a show that was all about how to be competitive and how to be at the top of the meta. That was never going to happen because I don't know how to do that. I'm still working that out. But what I do know from my card gaming experience is how to try to build stuff in a way that is just fun and have fun with it. So I do try to bring that across in the podcast. So I'm glad to hear that does come across. That is probably the thing I'm trying to drive home to people is that you don't need to show up with the best possible deck or not at all. You can show up and have just with something weird and have fun with it. You can build a deck just out of your favorite Digimon, and that's totally a fine way to play. And if that's what is fun for you, that's the way that you should play the game. That's the way the game is meant to be played, if that's what's fun for you.
Yeah, nice. I think it's a good message to leave that segment on. And unfortunately, speaking of the breeding area,
oh my God.
I think we have an entire episode of Digimon about the quote-unquote breeding area. So,
oh God.
But yeah, let's switch gears and talk about this week's anime episode 58, Hikari New Life, aka No 4 Rests for the Wicked, aka this is what the if there was a 99 style Digimon dub these days, Hikari's Exceptional Adventure, aka God for Rest Her Soul Mon.
Oh dear.
Spoiler policy, like always, we'll be talking about everything included in the episode on Crunchyroll, which includes the title and preview for next week, and also might drop spoilers for anything that happens in Adventure Zero 02, but we'll give you warnings if we mention anything beyond that, but we probably won't. But yeah, this week on Digimon Adventure, parentheses 2020, square bracket, the adventure of Taichi, Hikari and Takeru arrive at Petaldramon's forest, learn about some Digi-eggs, they find a group of Soulmon threatening the forest, so Hikari and Tailmon decide to take them on to minimize damage to the forest, while Taichi and Takeru gather eggs and protect Commandamon. Then Skullbalukimon appears and Angelmon struggles against them until Hikari sees an egg hatch and is inspired to monologue about light until Skullbalukimon is destroyed. So yeah, Connor, I am really interested coming into this like basically fresh without much of a strong opinion about the Adventure 2020 anime. How did this episode what was your reaction emotionally, and also like did it make any sense?
I think the events within the episode specifically did make sense. And thinking back on it, I was surprised how much sense they actually made. Like, I got the broad strokes. They turn up to this place that has a relation to a character that Hikari had some kind of relationship with. Petaldragon. They show up to this forest. She's like, "Oh yeah, I remember." Petaldragon seemed to have sacrificed itself in some way. And then there's these eggs, and we have to protect the eggs. And then there's a monster coming in. Like, the broad strokes, I understood what was going on. I understood what emotionally what they were kind of going for. I didn't have the emotional context for it, so I guess I missed some of the beats with Petaldragon. It seemed like really powerful stuff. I guess I don't know
I don't know if it was that powerful, but I think that was the earlier episode of Paladin was one of the weaker of the season, so I don't think you missed too much. I think you got the broad strokes, and that's all you needed to.
Well, good. Yeah,
understand.
Like, I understood broad strokes what was going on. I definitely had some questions about the dog car that they were traveling around in. That was upsetting.
Yeah, Commandamon, the dog car, is, I think, the biggest standout of the entire series, the MVP of the show. And they haven't not showed up in the card game at all, have they?
Haven't seen it. It was definitely new to me.
Yeah, that's a huge missed opportunity. I don't understand why they're not making that the mascot of the entire franchise.
Because it definitely feels like the card game is really tied into this particular iteration of the show. Like, all the Adventure Kids designs are taken from this version of the show rather than the previous version. A lot of the characters turning up in this are in the card game. It seems like they're really trying to tie it in. So yeah, if he's that important, it feels odd that they would not have included it yet.
Yeah, and I think this week's villain is an exception, but most of the time when an enemy shows up in the show, or like a key character shows up in the show, it's like, oh, this was in the last card game set. And you can't exactly predict because there's so many cool Digimon in the set, but like, it lines up pretty well most of the time, but there are exceptions. Like this week. Yeah, I mean, I thought this episode was it was kind of cool to see like the origin story for Primary Village or Village Beginnings. Like in the original show, it's like it's already set up in there by the time they get there. So it's kind of cool that, and I at first I thought it was weird that it's like, this isn't already a thing. Why is this being formed now? But I think Tailmon did explain that, like, because they defeated Millenniumon, the big bad, before. So like things are returning to normal, and that was kind of neat. And I thought it was in general pretty cool to see Hikari be so active, basically like an action hero, which I think is a pretty new side to her.
Yeah, that was really cool. And Tailmon, her and Tailmon taking charge was just awesome to see. Loved that.
Yeah. Like intellectually, I'm kind of disappointed that it was nice in the original show. The association with like child rearing was with Patamon, or with Takeru and Patamon.
Yeah.
And now that being with Hikari is a little, the gender politics of that like, oh, it's the female character that deals with the eggs and the child rearing is a little unfortunate. Like I thought it was cool how original Adventure kind of subverted that, and then this version kind of unsubverts it. But it was cool that she got to do it in this like big action hero kind of way. So still kind of subverted it in the end.
I guess there was that, now that I reflect on it, that quite uncomfortable part where Hikari is basically it seems like about to die almost, like be defeated by the big bad or killed by the big bad. But it's okay because the new Digimon was born, and now that you mention it, that's some unfortunate subtext. It's like it's okay that the women are dying because the baby was born. Ooh.
But I guess, magic exists. New life
Oh, well,
inspires
yeah,
her
of
to,
course.
yeah.
It's all fine. It's
Yeah,
fine.
it is also so weird that, like, considering how pivotal the Digi-Eggs or Digitama are to the card game, that this isn't the very first time they showed up in the show, but, like, it's basically, like, the second pivotal time, and it's like, this is one of the core concepts of the card game. Shouldn't you be tied into that better? But okay.
Yeah, it's very fundamental. It's technically optional to have Digi-Eggs, but I don't think anybody doesn't use them because there's no downside. So yeah, they appear in literally every deck. So it feels like they could be given a bigger focus in the show. And it's weird to hear that this is like the second time they've turned up. That is strange.
Yeah. But I mean, the show is, in some ways, it's like simplifying things a lot. So I think that's one of the things they probably wanted to simplify for a while.
Yeah.
I've heard some people complain that this episode basically, like, Metal Greymon or War Greymon could have appeared and made quick work, and there was like no point that they weren't just dealing with things.
That was one of my biggest questions. That was something I was going to ask you. Have we not hit War Greymon by now? Why are we still...
Oh no, we hit War Greymon like 20 episodes ago, so it's been a while.
So there was no in-universe reason that they didn't turn up. It was just because it was the Hikari episode.
I think the one caveat they gave was when Tailmon's like laying out the plan. They're like, oh well, if they fight, they'll kind of damage the forest. So Tailmon can be nimble and like not damage the forest. Yeah. But by the time that they're fighting Skullbalukimon or whatever, it's like the forest, a lot of it's been destroyed. I mean, I think you could you could fight back a little bit more, but yeah, I think it's mainly it's the Hikari episode,
I was wondering if they were operating under Power Rangers rules and they're not allowed to escalate a fight or something.
Also, this was another appearance of Hikari's crest showed up on the Digivice. For some context, compared to the original show, this arc, the crests have, like, they all have like compasses on their Digivices, and then the crests show up once they've like completed a task, kind of, or like done something that was emblematic of their crest, but they haven't been told what they mean. They're still this was the one time where they actually talked about their attribute, which I thought was fitting because like Hikari is named Light in Japanese. Like, I think she's the one character that, like, for her to monologue about her crest attribute actually makes a ton of sense, because she is, when your name is Light, it makes sense that you might have thought about light a lot,
Yeah.
But it, and in the original show, she's so passive and controlled by homeostasis and stuff. So it's like, it's nice to see her be kind of active in general. That was a cool aspect of this episode.
Yeah, it was nice that they gave her kind of more to do, especially because Light's a weird one to define. I think a lot of the other crest attributes, you kind of understand them, but Light is definitely a lot more nebulous. So the explanation that she gave was very useful to me, because I know what hope is. I know a bit about reliability, but Light was always kind of very abstract as a personality trait to embody.
I feel like the original show was like, Light means people worship you like a god, kind of, or like you're really like, I don't know. It was kind of strange, and so like, as much as I am a little bit sad about the like gender essentialism of child rearing being a female thing this time around, it does make sense that like light and hope are both things that make sense for like this concept of like new life and birth and stuff. So yeah, makes sense. All right, so let's move on to some 3-word reviews. First off, from @JosephSnosif, said secondary village history.
@Matthias FV08, Taichi, please leave.
Yeah, this show keeps doing these moments that I'm like, this is probably not a metatextual commentary, but like the fact that as soon as Taichi appears and like they're worried about there being some malicious entity in the forest, so as soon as Taichi appears, Tailmon's like, no, and I mean she's saying no to the fact that it's not Taichi, it's malicious, it's something else, but like Taichi appearing and then Taichi appearing and then Tailmon saying no, like I feel like someone making Zenma has to be aware of the how people are reacting. But
surely.
Bormon22 said Hikari Ghostbuster Extraordinaire.
Quadramon22, Hikari the Explorer.
Austin Aussie23 said unsatisfactory climactic moment.
CRR McRae said reincarnation finally explained.
Yeah, that's one of the weird things about the show is they've never, or like they've talked about it so little, and then just don't think about it. Don't think about whether they're murderers or not.
Oh no. But, have they not explained that before? Oh, that's dark.
Yeah. No, these kids have been murderers for a while, and they just don't want you to think about it. So
wow.
Dot Yawning said Ophanimon tease whelmed. So neither underwhelmed or overwhelmed.
I guess. I really thought we were going to get a Fanimon, but they kind of just tried extra hard and then solved the problem.
Yeah, it seems especially weird with, like, by all indications, the show is probably going to end around episode 66 or so. And so that doesn't leave much time. That's, 8 more episodes? Like,
yeah.
I thought if they're giving Hikari an episode now in the endgame, it's gonna be a Fanimon, but I guess not. Also, by the time this episode comes out, it might already be, there's probably gonna be some big announcement at DigiFest in a couple days, so it might already be outdated with knowledge of whether there's the show's continuing, whatever. But yeah.
Leo Untweeted said, "We want Lady Devimon."
Yeah, I miss Lady Devimon. Would have been a cool way to work her into a Angel Woman episode. But at NNM Podcast said, "Rest in pieces."
At PDX Anime said, "Angelwomon Holy Incubator."
Yeah. Bored Individual said, "Evolution moment wasted." Yeah, that's with these teases. Sometimes it's like, oh man, this tease is so impactful that it's like, why wasn't this more than a tease? Okay, I mean, it's a little weird, but oh well.
Oh well. At CC Takado said, "A plot retread."
Yeah, kind of very similar to the original Pedalgemon episode, but
yeah.
Okay, I can't. I don't know the reference enough to this, but Andy Lucas at least said, "In the style of Blues Brothers, I'm a Soulmon." Sorry, I'm not going to do the music. I don't know the tune.
Oh, I'm very glad it was you and not me, because I didn't know either. So, at Thousand Lion said, "Cool, proactive, beautiful."
And then on the most mysterious note, Daka and Jaxter said, "Cats versus hats." Oh, okay, wait, okay, yeah. The Soulmon had hats, yeah. And Chalmon's a cat. Okay, I got it. A little late, a little slow, but I got it. All right, so moving on to some listener comments and questions. Since we are running pretty long, so we had a pretty long, good card game discussion, I'm going to skim through some of these, so apologies if your comments and questions didn't get read, but they're great. Keep saying them in. I read them all. They're great to think about. Austin LC23 said, "This episode felt lackluster to me. I see the makings of something good, but the climax doesn't pay it off for me. We got one of those silhouettes that were happening pre-Millenniumon instead of an evolution or clever tactic. I also think the fact there's no caregiver like Elecmon for the eggs is an odd choice. This version of the digital world has clearly been less civilized than previous ones, but you'd think someone will protect the eggs. I felt like they were setting up that there's not a designated protector, but like I forget the names, but the Muchomon and Huamon were like kind of acting like that. So I think it makes sense that this is like the origin story. It hasn't really settled yet into there being a guardian or something. So I don't think it's too bad. At QB no Yoko, does this mean the kids are murderers? Because prior to this episode, the Digimon they fought never turned to eggs. Yeah. I think they've been murderers for a while, but also I don't know if, because we saw at the end of the episode, and I forget details, did we see Skullbalugimon turn into an egg? I don't remember.
It definitely did that thing where it faded out, and then we saw regular Balukimon. I don't remember whether it turned into an egg, though. I think it was more of a purification kind of.
Yeah, it looks like there is an egg.
There is? Oh, well, good.
Yeah, there is an egg.
It would be especially dark if, after the egg introduction, they were still straight up murdering Digimon.
Well, I'm worried that, like, it's some special power of Angelwomon that, like, their next episode going to go back to no eggs, just murdering. So, but yeah, it's weird. The history of Skullbalugimon is so strange because Skullbalugimon appeared in like the early 2000s, but the actual non-skull version of Balukimon only first showed up last year. So it's weird that well, I think because like the concept of Skullbalugimon is based on a ancient dinosaur fossil, so it's like okay, you start with the skull version because it's a fossil, and then almost 20 years later, then they finally make a light version or something. Corjamon 22 raised the very interesting point that Joe letting the 7-year-olds Hikari and Takeru go off on Commandamon by themselves doesn't really make any sense, which I totally agree. I hadn't thought about that. That they have like a Digimon protecting them, but he's not a fighting Digimon, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know why Joe left them behind, but oh well. And I mean, and then Corjamon 22 also like asked the question of like, does it make more logical sense for the eggs to spawn everywhere and then just kind of roll to this location? I don't think it makes sense, like logically, if you think about like the eggs are exposed and vulnerable while they're rolling. But if you get past the fact that it doesn't make any sense, it's kind of a cool concept. I think that's what they're going for. Don't really apply too much logic. It's the digital world. Things are weird.
Yeah, I think they just kind of put that to one side, even though if you think of the digital world as an ordered digital system, it actually makes more sense, I think, for them to have like a set spawning location, because it's not like it's like set up to be like, this is where the digi-eggs come in. It's a computer. It doesn't have to do things randomly. But that's just me. And I don't know very much. So maybe that's maybe that's totally outside of what they were going for. I don't know. As I said, I've seen 2 episodes of this, so
No.
take that with a grain of salt.
I mean, I think the show has Digimon in general is always so weird about like, oh, it's digital, but it's like, is it though? You kind of forget about the digital part a lot of it, like 99% of the time. So I like when they have some throwbacks to this looks like a fantasy world, but it still acts in this weird way because it's a digital world. So that set spawn location was a cool concept. I do kind of miss a little bit.
Yeah.
But Andy Lucas OE asked if basically what a favorite moment of the show so far, which I mean is kind of a hard question to ask someone who's seen 2 episodes. But I left a great comment that their favorite moment is in one of the climactic battles when everyone's basically been defeated and War Greymon shows up at the very last minute, and that's how they want to appear at the wedding, just arriving 20 minutes late. Holy water fountain erupts into a tower of flames with him held on strings in the center while everyone's excited they made it to the wedding. So
oh, that's
a great concept. My favorite moment of the series, it's kind of sad to say because it was very early on, but I think it was when Ogremon is defeated in like episode 9 or 10 or so. So it's kind of sad that I feel like the show hasn't topped that moment to me. But Rebellimon's appearance in the last couple episodes was close to that. But yeah, that's a little unfortunate. But I mean, that's more like the show's done some other cool moments aside from that. It's just the one that spoke to me the most.
I really liked when Greymon turned up for the first time. That was fun.
Yeah, that was one of the best moments of episode 1. I agree. Joseph Nosif asked basically if Angelmon could get the Angemon treatment and be reborn after a climactic battle. And that could fit with the Digitom episode and Patamon/DK's exposition. I don't think that makes sense for this show because I think they basically, the only explanation, which they had never actually done, but like the implied explanation for why Tailmon stays Tailmon is that she hasn't been reborn, whereas Angemon was reborn. So I think they kind of have to keep her not reviving. But, so I think that's kind of the concept. But I don't know if it's a great concept because I miss the character development Gatomon got in the original show where it wasn't just happenstance that she had survived. It was trauma that caused her to evolve. So, oh well. But anyway, last question. And this is more of a question for Connor. What's your favorite card art so far?
That's really tough because it was the art that drew me to the card game in the first place. It's really beautiful. I think one of the things that they've done really well with the card game is they've really gone all in on the art. But my standard answer to this question is that my favorite piece of card art is Agumon. I think it's ST5 or something like that. The one from the Gaia Red starter deck. It's the first piece I ever saw. And there's just something about like the pose for Agumon. He's kind of firing off whatever his attack is called. I think I'm going to go by the English name, the Pepper Breath, but also he kind of looks friendly. It's got the beautiful green and blue digital world background. It's just a really gorgeous piece of art, and really it was the first piece I saw, and seeing that made me think, wow, they're actually really putting in a lot of effort with this game. So I think that's probably still my favorite card art, even this many sets in and this many months on from its release.
I mean, there have been lots of, it's like the 8th incarnation of Digimon card game, and in all the previous ones I've been like, it looks fine, but the artwork in this card game just like looks fantastic across the board. There's so many different styles and they all look great. The one exception, which is like the recent news of the day, is the first, I don't know what you call it, the EX1 booster set.
Yes, the kind of special release
that is recreating the classic artwork.
Yeah, it really makes you realize looking at it how good the art for this game actually is, because the original art, it doesn't work. They're cool and nostalgic, but it's like, ugh,
yeah, it's nostalgic and some people like it, and that's fine, but I don't personally like it. I think it's kind of telling that as that set has been slowly revealed, the one card that I think has excited people the most is the one new artwork of Machine Dramon, and it's like, yeah, I think because that artwork looks amazing. Like all of the new artwork looks amazing.
I think my big problem with it is that the pieces are so static. Like it's literally just here's the Digimon drawn like in our style. It's not doing anything. It doesn't make me excited to like throw that down on the battlefield and send it at my opponent. It's not doing anything. He's just standing there.
One thing I did not realize with the card artwork until I think it came up in a recent episode of the Memory Gauge, and I was like, I am an idiot for not realizing this earlier, but that all of the Digi Egg or baby cards, almost all of them have both baby forms, and I was like, oh my god, they do. Wow. Well, most of them, almost all of them.
Yeah. Once you realize that and you start looking at them, it's a really cool detail.
Yeah, like even I'm looking at like BT1 Tanamon, and it's like oh no, it's just Tanamon. I'm like, no, you look in the background. They're little guys in the background. It's very cool, very cute. But my favorite arc is tough because there's so much great stuff. I think the one of the recent Black War Greymons, the I guess BT5 Black War Greymon is really great. I think that might be my favorite right now at the moment. But so much great looking stuff. But yeah, closing thoughts. I am curious now, having watched your second Adventure 21 episode. How has that? Are you more or less interested in like the show in general, or do you think you're going to stick to the card game? And
no, I think I would like to go back and watch the rest of the show. It definitely hasn't like put me off that idea. I was already planning to do that, and it hasn't dissuaded me. It was fine. It was an enjoyable way to spend sort of 25-30 minutes. I definitely didn't not like it. I sound like I've said yes, I'm going to watch the rest of the show, and then I'm saying to the episode. But I liked that I came in 58 episodes late, and I still understood all the important parts of the story that they told within this episode. I understand Kari's motivation. I understood what the threat was, what the stakes were, and I think the only thing that didn't really work for me were the villain, because he didn't feel like a character at all. It was just kind of a nebulous kind of threat. I don't know if Skull Bellucimon has had any history in this show, has appeared before.
no,
now just came out of nowhere.
This was everything.
Okay.
And it was it's just okay, here's a, you know, like, he's evil, he's attracted to good like a magnet, defeat evil. Okay, cool. Like, yeah, it's pretty simple,
which is a shame. It's a cool idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of my complaints of the show, and a lot of regular guests who've watched a bunch of episodes, like, it's not as like thoughtful or complex as the original show. But I think it does make it much more easier to jump in like you did and just experience one episode and then jump back out. So it's nice that it's more accessible, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a point in its favor, definitely.
But I also understand that, like, at this point, asking someone to watch 58 episodes is like, oh god, like, it's the longer it gets, the more intimidating it is.
Yeah, I was in my part of the world. We were in a sort of COVID lockdown, and even with all of that extra time, I was not looking forward to watching 57 episodes of this show back to back. I think that would have been a bit too much.
Damn. Well, so how would you rate this episode out of 5 stars, and who'd your MVP be?
I think I would give this a 3 out of 5, sort of mid-range, because as I said, the villain felt a bit lackluster to me. The resolution felt a bit lackluster. It didn't feel like they sort of, Hikari and Angelwomon, achieved anything or really changed in any meaningful way by the end of it in order to defeat the bad guy. They just kind of, as I said, tried a bit harder, and then the problem went away, which from listening to your show, I think is a bit of a ongoing problem with this series. That seems to be the way they resolve maybe a few of the problems that come up. MVP would probably go to Tailmon. I liked the way that she took charge. I liked the way that she immediately put the other Digimon in their place, saying, if you keep doing that, you're going to destroy the forest. Don't be stupid. We're going to do this the clever way. You stand back. We're going to deal with this. And then she just mowed down those ghosts. And I didn't really understand why punching them worked, but it did. And it was cool.
Yeah.
Like, you can't shoot them with fire, but you can punch them.
Yeah, the fire, they bounce, they reflect, but punching ghosts,
yeah,
that's the Digimon way.
Everybody knows that in the digital world, punching is the way to get rid of ghosts.
Yeah. I think, like, logically, that my MVP would have to be Tailmon. Like, speaking rationally, that's the only answer that makes sense. But I think emotionally, it was Commandamon. The one shot of Commandamon, like, sleeping in the background was the best moment of the episode. So he's the best boy.
I want to learn everything about him. I was enamored. Does he have 8 legs? Is that what I read?
Yeah.
Why does he have 8 legs?
I think there was one shot this episode where you kind of saw him like jumping in the air and you could see his 8 legs. But for a while, he showed up in the show for weeks. And then there was like a analyzer segment at the end that mentioned he had 8 legs. And it was like, what? Normally don't see underneath the fur. And it's like, 8 legs? What? And I was like, oh no, is he a spider under there? And okay, it makes more sense. He's like a dog that just happens to have 8 legs, but still. I was scared when I thought it was a spider.
Oh man, I wish Commandamon had been around when I was first watching the show as a kid, because isn't that every young boy's dream? He's like a car that's also your dog and your best friend. Isn't that the dream?
Yeah. But yeah, for the episode, I think I'm gonna also rate it 3 stars, like completely middle of the road. I really I had the reaction after watching this episode where I was like, I don't know what I think at all. Like it felt like it just like washed over me, and I was like, well, that was an episode. I really had to rewatch it just to even have thoughts about it. Like I was like, it was so completely middle of the road.
Yeah.
I don't know, something about that first viewing experience. I was just like, well, an episode. Yeah, that was an episode. Okay. um, but so, I think in the end, to rewatching it, like it had some pros, had some cons. It was Digimon. End of the story. But I'm excited for next week, episode 59, Bolt. Well, that title translation is weird. Anyway, Bolt Hirako Kawataribon is a weird title of an episode, but I'm excited for Koshiro to get his Mega Evolution, and the scenario of Taichi being the one trapped by Nanomon or Datamon, I think was the dub name, is kind of a neat inversion of Sora being trapped by Datamon in the original show. So that's kind of cool. I'm interested. Make Taichi the damsel in distress. Makes sense.
Is it too late in proceedings for me to ask how if they're separated, how is Taichi there as well as in this episode?
That's an interesting perspective because he just gets there. he flies on Metal Greymon, presumably, or like early on in this arc when they defeated Millenniumon, and there was a new arc, and they like got to a place that had a bunch of Mechanorimon. They were riding in these like flying mechanical Digimon, and so they all split up and flew off in these Digimon. But then like Taichi left his behind, and I guess just flies on Metal Greymon, but also like goes so fast that he can be in all these episodes. Like it, it's the speed that makes me the most confused because he presumably these are all happening. There's not like weeks in between. And he basically travels. He's able to get between episodes as fast as the other kids travel the entire time. It's bizarre. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it from the perspective of like watching every episode. It's like feels kind of like frustrating, exhausting. He keeps showing up, but I hadn't thought about how like if you just watch one of them, it's like how is he in all the other ones too? And we know just about as much as you do. So
it confused me because I watched this and then the preview came up and then he was there, and I don't know a lot, but I know how distance and time work.
Yeah, I mean, just swap out Takeru and Hikari, just replace the Photoshop layer, put in Koshiro. There you go. But before we close the show, do you want to recommend any non-Digimon media to people you've been enjoying lately?
Yeah, I wanted to recommend the video game Sea of Thieves. I've been playing that a lot recently. As I said recently, my part of the world went into another COVID lockdown, and the way that I've been spending a lot of time with my friends outside of that is the game Sea of Thieves, which is an online game you play as a pirate in sort of a world with other players also playing as pirates. You get your own ship. You can form a crew with your friends or with just random people if you like being yelled at by people, because for whatever reason that seems to always be the way with these online kind of things. But no, you can form a crew with your friends, which is what I've done, and you just kind of get your own boat and sail around. And there's not really levels or progression or anything like that. It's more just about being dropped into this world as a pirate with a ship and just finding your own fun and doing whatever you would like. Like there's treasure to find if you're so inclined, or you can go attack other people and be full pirate, or you solve puzzles, or really it's just what you make of it. And I think that's been really enjoyable and freeing in these kind of times where otherwise I've been stuck in my house with not much to do. So if you're a person who wants to go on an adventure without leaving your computer desk, I guess I would recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and they've just updated it recently, so there's a lot to do as well.
Nice. I feel like I've heard in the past a lot about that game, but I hadn't thought of it as a way to stay connected and be connected in the middle of lockdown. So that sounds great. I'm going to recommend the new season of Ted Lasso that just premiered. By the time listening to this, I think episode 2 will be up. But season 1 was fantastic. One of my favorite shows ever when I discovered it late to the game. And season 2 has started off pretty strong. There's one part that I'm worried about. I'm worried there's a certain direction they might be heading some characters towards. But aside from that, it's fantastic. Really interesting introduction. Throwing a sports psychologist into the mix is, I think, really fascinating. So I'm excited. It's been really good so far. But yeah, I guess that brings us to the end of the show. This episode of Podages was brought to you by inspiring monologues about the meaning of light and darkness. When all else fails, just act like it's the climax of a Kingdom Hearts game, and you'll always win the day. Last week's Digiprompt was, what scenario from any season of Digimon do you think would be improved by replacing the main cast with dozens of Taichis? And there were so many great answers to this question. So I don't have one favorite, but three of my favorite ones were Agucham64 replied with images, which are images themselves are kind of a spoiler for one season, so I won't say. But the images were summarized by at Broken Arc Games of Ty killing Ty while Ty watches crying. I want to see. CRR McRae said the final battle of 02, where they somehow used all their evolutions at once, except instead they all evolve into every version of Taichi, which I also want to see. I recently rewatched the end of 02, and so that spread of all the different Digimon, all the different Digivolution forms, just all the different Taichis, yes. Great way to end the season.
Love it.
And Andy Lucas OE said the first scene of Adventure, which in the dub when Ty is introducing everyone. Oh, by the way, my name is Ty. This is Ty. She's okay for a girl. And Ty's too cool. Just look at that hair. And this little kid is Ty. He should have gone to computer camp. That's Ty. I bet you can guess his favorite color on the first try. Ty is Ty's dopey little brother. Oh, and this is Ty. Don't ever scare him. He'd probably wet his pants. That it would be fantastic.
That would be amazing.
It already was fantastic. But this week's DigiPrompt is, what Digimon would you want to see as the guardian for a primary village / a village of beginnings? Send any feedback to podages@gmail.com, to @podages on Twitter, or in the episode comments on podages.com. And check out the show notes to find a link to join our Discord server, and share the podcast with your friends who seem like they're going to come in and be way too overprotective, but instead just sit in the sidelines and let their 8-year-old sister run around and be an action star. And if it's your first episode, you can also find us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you find podcasts. So Connor, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was great fun.
Yeah, and if people want to find your podcast or you personally, where can they check you out online?
They can find me on Twitter at Connor EFMG, so that's CONNOR EFMG, or you can find the Memory Gauge podcast. The website is memorygaugepodcast.buzzsprout.com, but you can find us basically anywhere you find podcasts, so Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, that kind of place.
Nice. And I am, as always, Jeff on Twitter, and if you're interested in general anime that's not Digimon, I have a general anime podcast, Love It a Wee Bit. You can check it out. And thank you everyone for listening. I'll be back next week to talk about episode 59, Bolt, Harako Kabutarimon. Bye.
Bye.
And remember, never stop Digivolving.